In this video, I'm going to add checkpoints to my game. So if you have like a real big obby or some course-like structure and players need more than one sitting to get through, you may want to have checkpoints so if they leave the game, they can come back later and continue. Or if they die too, right? So let's say we're walking past this white checkpoint. Oh, we died. Let's try this out. This one's pretty easy. A lot of people can do this one. Oh man, died. Now I'm going to go back. Sweet, I'm on the white. But let's say we spend 3 days and we get here and then you have to go do something like walk the dog and you have to leave your game. Oh, bummer. And when you come back, man, I hope I don't have to go through that whole obby again or that whole quest string again. Where are we at? Brah, we're on the blue. That's pretty cool. And then when you run through here, your checkpoints are going to be reset, right? There's like a finish line. And then when you leave your game and you come back, you start over, right? You're going to start from the beginning. Let's try that just to make sure. Sweet. All right. Let's go ahead and get started with that. So I have an empty base plate right here. And the first thing I need to do is make some checkpoints, right? We're just going to add some parts. Go over here, part, add it. And we'll call this one L1 for level 1. So we're going to have like level 1, 2, 3, such like that. And I'll make it purple. And let's make the size a little bit different. I'll make it kind of spawn location like. So maybe 12 by 1 by 12. That's pretty cool. I'm going to go ahead and straighten it out. Not that that's needed. Let's do a Control-D to duplicate it. And there we go. We got another one. Let's go back up here. We are going to make that a different color. I don't know, green. That's good. Give it a different name. It's going to be like L2. Cool. Control-D. Make another one. Make a third. Right. And then we're going to add one. I'm going to add one and show you how easy it is to add checkpoints. We'll make that one like red. All right. This is going to be L3. Sweet. And then let's make a spare. So I'll click this L2. Go ahead and hit Control-D to duplicate it. Move it over here. This one I'm going to call, I'll just call it nothing. Right. It's not in there yet. Nothing. All right, and then we'll make that a different color so you don't get confused. There, make it kind of grayish. Cool. So we have our checkpoints. We're going to need a finish line. Let's go over here. Yeah, part. This is going to be our finish line. I'm going to make it bigger. That way. We'll go that way. We'll go up some. And we're going to have to anchor that, of course. We should probably anchor all of these. But before we do that, let's call that part finish line so we don't get confused. Finish line. And I'm going to make it invisible. But since we're making the game still, we'll make it like 0.8 so we can kind of see it, but it will be invisible in our game. And then I'm going to go down here, anchored. Let's get them all at the same time. This one, can collide, is going to be turned off. Oh, I went right by it. There it is. Can collide. Now let's get our finish line, control click, L3, nothing, L2, L1. Let's anchor it all. Anchored, so they don't flop around and stuff like that. All right, so we should be able to run through that. Can collide is off. Everything else is fine. Let's go ahead and group our parts together. So we got our L1 here. I'm going to do a control click on L2, control click on L3. I'm going to right click, and then I'm going to hit group as model. So this is going to be my Lokes. There we go. If we open it up, we'll see our L1 through L3. Now I'm going to hit Lokes. I'm going to right click and then I'm going to do a group as model. And this is going to be checkpoints. Check points. Now let's go down to server script service and we're going to add a script. Hit the plus script and we'll call that Game Manager, Game MGR. Cool. What we're going to do, we need to get the player service, players, game, get service, players. I'll make this a little bigger in case you can't see it. There we go. That's pretty good. And let's get our checkpoints from the workspace. So I'm going to say local checkpoints, and we got our workspace. We can do a wait for child. Not that you usually have any trouble getting stuff from the server side. There we go. Now we're going to need a folder on our players to store the data for the checkpoints. I'm going to call this function add stats folder, and we're going to add it to the player. Right? That's how we're going to save our stuff. We'll do a local player stats equals instance.new folder. We're going to put that folder on the player. And then we'll get player stats, name, and I call this player stats like this just because it's a lot like leader stats, but you don't really have to spell it correctly, right? This is going to be a general folder. It's not like a leaderboard where if you don't spell it correctly, Roblox isn't going to know what to do with it. We'll take a look at it in a minute. So on our player stats, we're going to need something. We'll call that level. That's the checkpoint level. We'll say instance new, and we'll use string value so we can store the names of the checkpoints, because you might not want to call them 1, 2, 3, 4. You might want to call it like dragon level or something like that. All right. So then we'll do player stats will be the parent of the level. Right, so we have our player stats on the player, level is on the player stats. Now let's go ahead and give level a name. And we'll just call it level. And let's initialize the level value to the empty string, which it is anyway, but just to be sure. And then we got our level changed event. We are going to connect that to an anonymous function, and this is going to save stuff off. So the value is going to be what is changed on level, which is going to be the level name. Right now, let's just print it out. Let's say print value equals value, and then you can see. What else are we going to do? We're going to need to spawn our character. Right, so when we enter the game, when our character enters the game, let's make a function here, a local function, my respawn, and let's pass in the player and the character, right? That way we don't have to get the character again. I'm going to get the character when the character added event fires, so I'll have a character. It's going to save me some time. And I'm going to check for the level on my player. So I'm going to say player stats. So we're assuming player stats is added here. Level dot value. So when we get a value in our level, when we hit a checkpoint, let's check to make sure we have one. It might be empty, right? So if level or LVL is not equal to the empty string, then we're going to do stuff. What are we going to do? We're going to get the location. I'll just call it loc, and we'll get our checkpoints, right? That's up above. Checkpoints up here. That is all of our checkpoints in there. And we'll get the locs from the checkpoints. Open square bracket, LVL, right? That's going to be the name of the loc. And now we'll get the position. Then we're going to move our humanoid root part, HRP, on the char. We'll do a wait for child humanoid root part. Make sure you spell that right. Humanoid. Yeah, that's right. All right. And we'll get the humanoid root part and then pivot to, so that's setting the C frame. That's a newer way of doing it. I'm just going to create a C frame inside the pivot to. So we'll get the C frame.new. We'll use the loc, and I want him to fall down like he's beginning from a regular, like he's starting from a regular spawn location. So I'll just bump him up by using a vector3 new, 0 in the X. We're not going to modify the X on the loc, on the C frame for the loc. We're going to increase Y by 100 so he falls, and then we're going to hit a 0 here for the Z. So X and Z is not going to change on our C frame right here, but Y is. We're going to pump them up in the air. Now, if any of you guys have messed around with the character joining the game and getting the humanoid root part and trying to transport it someplace right on startup, you'll notice it's a little bit glitchy. If you put a weight in here, it will fix that glitch. It's weird. And I have a save file. I have a save player location video. I had to do the same thing a year ago. I thought they would have fixed it by now, but they didn't. All right, so let's get our player service. We'll get the player added event, right? And then we're going to connect that to a function. The player is going to get passed in because it's a player added event. We are going to add the stats folder to the player so that he has his player stats folder on him. And then we're going to get the player.character added event, connect that to an anonymous function. The character is going to get passed in. I call that char. And then we'll do our my respawn. We'll pass in the player and the char. Now this is cool and all, but we don't have any checkpoint stuff yet. Let's go ahead and try this out. At least see if the player stats is getting added to the player. So where is that? If we go under the player service, open that up, look at your player, open that up. Player stats. Open that, level. What's in level? Nothing, right? We gave him the empty string when he was starting out. But when he runs over these little block things here, that's going to update. This level is going to update. Let's go ahead and do that. So I turned Roblox Studio Player off, and I am going to go to my checkpoints right here, this model. And inside the checkpoints model on that top level, I'm going to hit the plus. I'm going to add a regular script. And then I'm going to call this checkpoint script, something like that. Checkpoint script. Cool. And we don't want to add touched events to all of our checkpoints manually. Let's just go ahead and get the lokes right down here. That's got all of our checkpoints in there. We'll say lokes equals script.parent.lokes get children. So it's going to get everything in that folder. I'll do a for I and v in pairs. So we are going to loop through the lokes. All right, so I is like 1, 2, 3, 4, and V is the locations. All right, so we're going to get the V, and then we are going to connect a touched event to each loke part, right? These are all of our parts. We'll do a connect function, and then I'll do a other part. That's the part hitting our location, right, our V. And then let's go ahead and see if that's a player. So I'll say local player equals game dot players colon get player from character. We'll say other part dot parent. What we're doing there is we are checking to see if this other part is like a hand or a foot. The parent's going to be the character. Then we'll be able to get the player from the character. The player will be here. If it's not, if it's anything else and a player is not returned, it's going to be nil, right? Player will be nil. So I'll say if player equals, then, no, we got a player. We'll say player dot, what do we call this? Player stats. It doesn't help you with it. Player stats. And then we have level on there. Got to spell it right. And the value is going to be the v dot name. When we hit our finish line down here, it's going to be very similar. Let's grab this code right here, do a Control C. Let's go down to finish line, hit a plus, add a script before we lose what we copied. Control V. Oh, that's pretty good. We just got to change this V right here to script.parent. And that's going to be our touched event for the finish line. This V, nah. What we're going to do when we finish, we are going to make that the empty string once again. Now let's go ahead and try this out. All right, so go to view output window. And when we hit a checkpoint. Oh, it says it. Value L1. Now, if we die, we're going to go back to that checkpoint. Let's go ahead and reset character. And we should go back to purple, right? On our character added, we do our my respawn. Boom, there we are. But if we leave the game, it's not gonna save that. We have to add data persistence. So let's go ahead and turn this off. We're gonna go over to our home tab, save your game. Mine's already saved. And we'll go down to security. Enable studio access to API services. We're going to hit that. We're going to hit our save button. And now let's go back to server script service game manager. I'm going to close this output window for now. And we have to put our data store stuff in there. We're not really going to need that much though, right? We'll do our local DSS equals game get service data store service. And now we're going to need a data store for that. I'll just call that DS. We get our DSS variable and then get data store. And name it whatever you want, my data. And it has to be unique throughout your experience, but you can use the same name throughout different games, right? Or different experiences. They call it experience now, right? Where are we going to call this DS? Let's go down to right above where we have our player added event, right? When people join the game, let's make a local function called init player data. Pass the player in, and we're going to get some data. I'm just going to directly call the DS. You should look up protected calls if you want to make your code a little bit stronger. And get rid of that IntelliSense. Get async, right? We're going to get an asynchronous call to the data store. It's going to return data. We'll do the player user ID. So we're going to identify the data by the player's user ID. If there's data, then player stats level value equals the data. Cool. Now we have to call that, right? Where are we going to call that? Control C. I think I'm going to call this right above my respawn, right? And you could do it in here, but sometimes anytime you use data store calls, it slows things down, and you don't want your player to be added prior to this connection event. So I just put it in here. Make sure we don't have any race conditions for our code. All right, so where do we actually set this data right here? Let's go ahead and do a Control C to copy it, because it's kind of a lot to type. We go up here where we did our add stats folder. When level changes, it's signaled with the change, which is our checkpoint name. So if I do a data store set async, once again, probably a good idea for a protected call. Player dot user ID, paste that in there, and that's where we're going to save our data off. All right, so let's try this out. Enter my world. I go to my first checkpoint. Let's go to the green one. And then we're going to end the game. Come back a little bit later. Where are we going to end up? Cool. Oh, I should have been checking my output window all along too, right? But it's looking good. All right, now when we get here, it should clear out our checkpoints on our player stats, right? There we go. Let's go ahead and end. And then we're going to come back in, hit the play button. We should go back to the beginning. Cool. How do we add a checkpoint, right? Like, let's say your game gets bigger and bigger. Well, we got this nothing out there. Let's just drag that in to our lokes, right? So there's our checkpoint model. There's the lokes. Plop it in. You have to put it on the level of lokes. It's got to be a unique name. These all have to be named uniquely the way I have this set up. And then we can just drag it to where we want it. When we hit it, it should work. So let's go ahead and hit the play button. See if we got another checkpoint. There we go. Here's our level 1. Cool. Nothing. Does that work? If we die, let's try both. Reset character. How's that going to work? There we go. What if we end the game? Let's move up a little bit. And you can end on the checkpoint. I just wanted to make it interesting. Let's hit the play. Bruh, it's working pretty good. And then when we get to the end, it'll clear out.